This is Agent Carter on Defenders TV Podcast, Season 1, Episode 1, Now is Not the End. Welcome back to Defenders TV Podcast, the home of the Marvel Netflix series, but also the home of Agent Carter. This is Defenders TV Podcast episode 19, where we will be looking at the Marvel show Agent Carter, which has now arrived in Ireland and the UK. I'm one of your hosts, John.
And I'm Derek, your other host. Really excited about this one. If you've been following us on Twitter for the last while under Defenders Cast, you'll have seen that we've been really excited about the coming of Agent Carter to the UK. It was almost a possibility that it was never going to come here. It's broadcast in the US a couple of months ago in a short run, 8 episodes, but never got a release in the UK. Luckily, thanks to ABC Studios UK and Fox UK, the program's now been released and we've finally got a chance to see that wonderful Agent Carter and in all her goodness and gloriousness.
With a lovely red Stetson hat, looking stylish and cool and all feminine, yet hard and tough and rocking. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. And of course, it brings you one step closer to S.H.I.E.L.D. The form of the SSR.
Yes.
The Strategic Scientific Reserve. Mm-hmm. The precursor, if you will, to S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, for those of you listeners out there who've been with us since the first episode, you may have heard me talk about one of my favourite films was Captain America, the First Avenger. Agent Carter ties directly into Captain America, First Avenger. We'll talk about that a lot more, I'm sure, over the course of these episodes. It is my favourite movie because it's very much about one of my favourite characters, Nick Fury, and his Howling Commandos becoming Captain America's Howling Commandos. Agent Carter is a great character, really interesting character, and I've been really excited about this show. This is also a show that I saw footage for at New York Comic Con last year, making me hugely excited for the show, and then unfortunately never got to see an episode of it. So I'm delighted to finally get to sit down and see the show. So that's me, and I'm really excited about it.
I'm really excited about it too, just purely based on Hayley Atwell's brilliant performance in Captain America, the First Avenger. Absolutely was not expecting that kind of love interest in the film. And when it was there, it felt real, genuine, and Hayley Atwell did a bang-on performance, really, of being the First Avenger's confidant, pep talker, but also lover and friend. Yeah. And it was really, really good. And for me, a lot of that emotion came out as well and continued through into this first episode of Agent Carter. Really, really good.
All right, John, do you want to tell us what we got with the plot synopsis for episode 1 of Agent Carter?
In 1946, a year after the apparent death of the love of her life, Steve Rogers, Peggy Carter is relegated to secretarial duties in the misogynistic Strategic Scientific Reserve, the SSR. The latest case of the SSR is the manhunt for Howard Stark, who is now accused of treason, branded a traitor for selling weapons-grade tech to the enemies of the US. In hiding, he secretly recruits Peggy to clear his name, giving her the services of his butler, Edwin Jarvis. Before he flees the USA, he explains that one of his bad babies, nitramine, is about to be sold on the black market in New York. As Peggy investigates the nitramine sale, the mystery of the seller deepens and unknown, dangerous forces close in on Peggy as she finds herself in increasing jeopardy as she is warned that Leviathan is coming.
Oh yes. This episode was directed by Louis D'Esposito, who is known for his work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He worked on Iron Man, worked on Avengers Assemble.
Certainly did.
Very heavily involved in the Marvel Universe. Delighted to see that he was involved in this. He also did the Agent Carter one-shot, which was the cause of this show, essentially. The reason for this show. It was a small Blu-ray extra for Iron Man, and kind of gave us some kind of backstory for Agent Carter, and really the reason that this show has been picked up.
It showed her that she was a capable, meticulous, and really powerful female character. One I think that has been really given a great, strong voice in the Marvel Universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that this is one of the comic book characters that really has given a great female character. And that's played on in this episode anyway. And I suppose this would kind of lead me to my first point.
Mm-hmm.
We are, like with Defenders TV podcast, like with the Hannibal TV podcast that I do with with our friend Irene, we take 5 points from the episode, and mine is really just the emotion of Peggy Carter, played by Hayley Atwell in this episode. I think there's a number of them that just it puts across the writing even more so, really makes you feel for her. And it really kind of comes from three main elements. One is obviously, as I said previously, just that link to Captain America. You really get the sense that she's missing him hugely from the previous film, on the fact that she's lost him. She thinks he's dead and gone. Little does she know there's a little Captain America popsicle up there in the Arctic. But that emotion that she portrays and projects to the audience, I really felt that, and I think that also then comes with the death of her roommate at the hands of this unknown assassin that tracks her down to her apartment where she's sharing with, I think it's Colleen is her roommate, and that too is. You see again, there's a real deep emotion being portrayed here in this TV show. And then I think the other is just that inner strength of Agent Carter living in 1940s US, but obviously it's not restricted, that kind of society to the US. It was obviously occurring in Europe as well, but just that, inner strength required to be a female in a male-dominated work environment and world at that moment in time. And certainly, I know from in the UK that there's very much that moment where, because all the men were fighting in World War II, all the women were called upon very much outside of the box for the society at the time to take up hard labor, doing manufacturing work, to build tanks, bombers, to be involved in things such as espionage, working in jobs that normally would not have seen women being in those roles. Even things like land girls in the UK, where they were essentially becoming farmers, but doing the physical work, not just simply being a farmer's wife or something. All these roles, during the course of the war, all had women taking over from the role of men, because the men were off fighting generally. And all of a sudden, the end of the war comes, and to some extent, reverses did happen. And that was kind of a blow, in a sense. And that made, all of a sudden they've been doing these really important roles. Next thing, that's gone and been taken away from them. And really what we see in Agent Carter, and the manifestation of that, is that she was high-level espionage involved in really secret development of Captain America, that whole program, and now she is essentially being asked to do filing and administrative work in the SSR.
Absolutely.
She wants, and she can do so much more, and I love that emotional connection to that inner strength of Agent Carter, as well as then just her sensitive emotional side from missing Captain America and feeling responsible then for Colleen's death. I thought this was really, really well done by Hayley Atwell, and really great writing from the creators.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of really good points that you bring up. And it's definitely one of my points, obviously, is the performance of Hayley Atwell in this episode. It is fantastic, I must say. A couple of little good things that they did bring into it. You mentioned about women taking on the roles of the men while they were away fighting the war. Great moment with Colleen when they do meet. They do share a room, essentially, because Colleen works every hour of the day. Peggy seems to be a bit more flexible in her role because she's as you say, working answering the phones in the SSR, so generally has a day job. Colleen comes home, obviously dog-tired from her work, letting Peggy know that 10 girls have been let go because 10 GIs got released from the war. So this whole story seems to be, or this whole episode seems to be centering around how women dealt with that displacement of their traditional role, becoming the worker and the provider for their family, and then having that rug pulled from under them when they were basically being asked to go back into the kitchen in the 40s when their husbands came home, or when their boyfriends came home, or when, nobody connected to them came home. Their job is just given up and given to the GI so that they had some work when they got home from war, essentially. But I love that Peggy has a different arc than a lot of the other women that we see, or well, definitely Colleen in this episode, because she's the central woman for to kind of show the juxtaposition of what's happening with Peggy. But she does have a different role here. Peggy had a huge amount of responsibility, and clearly in the first Avenger, she fought her way to that position in the army where GIs didn't talk back to her. They treated her as an equal. She was absolutely on the field of battle. In First Avenger, you see her being talked to by one of the new recruits, and she cuts him down instantly, which is what we love about Peggy Carter. But she's now been put back into a society who doesn't treat her like that, who says to her, "You're here to answer the phone and take notes, and that's it. That's all you're there for." Peggy's going to fight that, but she's going to do it with a really strong female quality, a really strong sense of character. And yeah, you absolutely called it out correctly. Love Haley Atwell in this. Absolutely brilliant performance.
So Derek, what's your first point?
Yeah, I think probably my second point, because as I say, Peggy's definitely my first point. But my second point is also kind of connected to yours as well. It is the connection to Captain America. Huge lump in my throat at the opening in this episode. Did not expect that final scene from Captain America: The First Avenger. I didn't expect that to be the opener of the episode, showing the interplay between those two characters and that moment of loss for Peggy as she sits on the phone and hears the final words of Captain America, of Steve Rogers, as he goes, saying, "You're my best girl," saying that I want to go to the dance with you next week, and we know that's never going to happen. Oh, look at me, I've got a little lump in my throat even thinking about it now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had that too. It's one of my points, so we really are crisscrossing our points here. I just thought the fact that it linked so nicely with the events of Captain America, the First Avenger, the whole sort of final talk and dialogue between Steve Rogers and Haley Atwell from that film, and then the radio cutting and going dead, but also just having Dominic Cooper back as well as Howard Stark, I just thought was really, really good. And of course, we see him in a completely different situation here than we did in the film, where he's very much, again, involved in the army and supplying them with, gifts that they can use to rain merry hell down on their enemies. Here, he's cast in a different role that, well, maybe he wasn't all genuine. And of course, we're moving into that whole theme as well of the Cold War, and obviously with the Soviet Union, and this idea that giving weapons grade, he's essentially been branded a traitor, giving weapons grade tech to enemies, which, okay, in the 40s and within the Marvel Universe, it could ultimately be something like an AIM or a Hydra or something like that. But it could alternatively be the Soviet Union. Very much that play that's going on there. And I do like the fact that even though there was that connection there with Captain America, it actually, in terms of Dominic Cooper, who came into episode 1 of Agent Carter, that he's cast in a completely different light and a completely different role as the man on the run, in a sense, and potentially, we don't know yet, being the bad guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So really good.
Yeah, a nice little tie again to Iron Man, to Tony Stark. At the start of Iron Man, you had Tony Stark essentially still being the businessman, still selling weapons, obviously brought from his father. So we knew that Howard Stark was going to be dealing in weapons, and they've done it really well here, where it opens the episode on, the funny playboy who essentially builds weapons of mass destruction is actually being cast in the light of criminal number one by the US government. A lot of great little parallels there with the McCarthyism of that period, where people were being accused of being traitors just because of their individual beliefs. A lot of people turning on the playboys of the time who didn't go to war. So quite an interesting little moments in there. It's really good episode of the show. So John, what's your next point?
My other point is just the lightness of touch in the writing of the show and in elements of the character, which just really injected so much fun into the proceedings.
Absolutely.
Whether it was just like the Britishisms that, like Crikey O'Reilly, or as the Roxxon oil refinery is about to explode, that Peggy Carter is quite calmly trying to say, "Would you mind pulling the car around to Jarvis?" Despite the fact that utter annihilation is imminent. That cool-headed sort of unflustered, stiff upper lip kind of dialogue of someone from that era who's from Britain, I really, really liked. Obviously, born in Britain, but it's like, it's something that felt real, and that's what they would say at that time. But it was done with a lightness of touch that didn't make it feel stuffy. It made it fun, given the dire situation that they found themselves in. So I really like that lightness of touch. I loved the fact that as well, Jarvis is portrayed as someone that goes to bed at 8:30, even though he's a grown man.
Mm-hmm.
It seems as though potentially, whilst he keeps things away from his wife, and you don't see his wife in this episode, that he's probably the one that's bossed around a bit. I get that sense, but I love the fact that whilst Peggy is dealing with weapons grade Stark tech, is battling bad guys and so on, you've got Jarvis who's making a souffle for his wife, and I just loved that. It was so funny. I mean, I think I tweeted out that both of them classically trained, one in the art of war and one in cordon bleu and being able to make the perfect souffle. That was really, really good touch, really good fun, some light humour, which really just I thought was sparkly within the context of this episode. So I loved it. Yeah, really good.
Absolutely, James D'Arcy is a great casting choice for this show. He's so good in this part, and he plays a really great foil to Hayley Atwell. Again, as you say, we've talked about it a minute ago about the men from war coming back and having to take back up their roles. It very much feels like James D'Arcy is taking up the role at the time of the woman in the household. He is the one that's cooking food for his wife when she returns home from work, presumably. He is the one that cleans up after all of Stark's messes that he gets into. He mentions it a few times about having to get the starlets out of the house and make cover stories for Stark and where he is. I love the idea that Jarvis is this character, that he is the PA essentially to Stark. He's essentially taking up that role that Pepper Potts will play to Tony in the future, which I think is really interesting.
And ultimately, we see the Vision in his nascent being,
Mm-hmm.
his nascent form.
Yeah.
He's the Vision.
Yes.
Little does he know that he will become the Vision.
Absolutely, that eventually Tony Stark will create the AI that runs his entire household based on this Jarvis, his father's butler, I presume, something like that. His father, PA, and who will eventually become the Vision. Yes, in the Avengers. So loads of ties. It's all connected, as they say in the Marvel universe. Really, really good.
Big time. Derek, what's your third point?
I definitely had a very similar point about the pattern of the dialogue, just the language between those two characters. Absolutely loved it. You're spot on there. It doesn't feel like any other Marvel show. It doesn't feel like any of the Marvel films. It feels like these characters would naturally speak to each other this way. I love that pattern, how it's written. But one tiny point that I do have is about Roxxon Corporation. You did mention it slightly in there, but I think it's a huge point for me. A huge little nerd moment when I saw the Roxxon sign in there. Roxxon Corporation has been in every single Marvel movie. They've always had something in the background, a sign, something like that. And they're hugely important to Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. If you haven't read the comic book Nick Fury versus S.H.I.E.L.D., it's fantastic and shows how central Roxxon, the oil corporation, are to the Marvel universe, and really cool to see them being used in here, and really cool to again see the connections that we have in the Marvel universe. This is just because it takes place in 1942. just ahead of all of the other Marvel films that have been made. Just because it takes place then doesn't mean it doesn't matter, which I love. I think that's a really good touch from the writers of the show to keep it grounded and keep it feeling connected.
Yeah, and of course, like any evil oil refinery or evil industrial empire, it certainly gets sucked into almost like a singularity.
It does.
Yeah. That was a great bit of special effects as well.
Absolutely.
And I did note that the back bumper and the number plate was ripped from the car. The car only just escaped from the ensuing chaos and madness that was left because of the activation of the nitramine, of unstable compound.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder whether the number plate is the start of a clue for the investigation of that plant and who caused the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether that implicates, obviously, Howard Stark.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
It
Yeah.
could well do.
Looking forward to seeing that now. Definitely. John, what's your next point?
I just want to say there were 3 people that showed up on the show that I did not expect.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were just moments where I was, okay, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
That's a blast from another past. And there's another blast from the past. And they go in this order, really.
Mm-hmm.
There was Andre Royer, who played Bubba in The Wire.
Yes.
And he was playing Spider Raymond
Mm-hmm.
in the club that Haley Atwell knocks out and discovers sort of a vessel of nitramine and takes it back. But I was just there going, it's Bubba. It's Bubba
Yeah.
from The Wire. Really good to see him in the show. I presume he's only in the one episode, given that he was sort of taken out, really.
Yeah, twice.
Twice, exactly. But, you know, it was really nice to see Andre Royer.
Yeah, he cleans up well, doesn't he? The last time we saw him, he was essentially living on the street in The Wire. He was just covered in dirt all the time and wearing clothes that he'd found. In this, he's dressed up in a nice, clean, sparkly white suit. Yeah, it looks good, cleaned up.
Not a shopping trolley in sight. Yeah. Exactly. The next one was Chad Michael Murray.
That's
I
right.
was like, he played one of the agents, one of the SSR agents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a bit of a male chauvinist about him, possibly
Yep.
there.
Not a
Certainly
big
at the
fan.
moment, no. Playing Agent Jack Thompson. But again, it was like blast from the past. One Tree Hill just came flooding back. I was like, you know, the successor to Dawson's Creek came on in One Tree Hill. I remember watching it quite a lot as grown up. And yeah, fantastic. I was like, oh, it's really good to see him on here again. You know, hopefully his character gets a bit better.
Yeah.
Becomes less chauvinistic as the season goes on. So it'd be interesting to see how that character develops. But it was really kind of good, again, to see someone from my past growing up back on the TV screen.
Yeah, unfortunately, I definitely want him to get a sock in the jaw from Peggy.
A fisticuffs.
Little fisticuffs from Peggy, I think.
Yeah.
He's talked to her pretty poorly so far.
And then the third one, which might be no surprise given that, you know, it's Marvel. There's obviously King Whedon has been involved. And of course, he is a Joss Whedon regular.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Enver Jokaj, who plays Daniel Souza. So he's a war veteran who's still got sort of a long-lasting injury which requires him to walk with a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
But there you go. He's there, and I just suddenly... Dollhouse came flooding back to me as well, which was a great Whedon show, which was only for 2 seasons. I loved that show. It was really, really good. So there was 3 characters that I just hadn't heard about in the lead up to Agent Carter. It was literally, you know, very much about Haley Atwell. It was about Howard Stark and Jarvis. So to see some of these supporting characters coming into play was really good. And the fact that they just brought so many memories back from previous shows that I'd loved and I'd watched was great as well. It really kind of started getting me bonding with Agent Carter even more in
Yeah.
that sense. Yeah, so really loving this episode for a whole range of different reasons.
Yeah, definitely. And brings me on to my next point. It is Enver, and it is his portrayal of Daniel Souza. I think it's hugely important to call him out in this episode. I think he does a fantastic job playing this role. It's it's something that they seem to be exploring very well. Haley Atwell's character is exploring coming back from war as a veteran and not being given the respect because she's a woman. And what Daniel Souza's character seems to be exploring is coming back as an injured war veteran, coming back with this limp, potentially lost a leg, is what he kind of explains. I think he's lost his leg, but essentially being treated again as the kicking post for everybody. Poor choice of words, Derek. Sorry. That he's essentially at the bottom of the pile of all the men in the SSR office as well.
Yeah.
So he's just above the level of Peggy Carter because he is a war veteran, but only just because he is an injured war veteran. I like that they're exploring this.
And yeah, you see the empathy between the two characters, and that they recognise that in a sense they're getting a short straw at the SSR in terms of their assignments. They know that they can do so much better than what they've been given, and you can see that understanding and empathy and that connection as a result between these two characters.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see how that develops over this season as well. So I really like seeing that male juxtaposition of, in a sense, what Peggy, the female version, is kind of feeling here, to show that that it does go beyond just simply male female. It can be common to both, but I really enjoyed their kind of connection, definitely. Yeah. And certainly given what happens in the club as well with Peggy, the fact that she is photographed and they do get that film back, you wonder whether that investigation may explode, obviously, if they can identify Peggy Carter from the reel of film. As soon as they realise that she is somehow involved with Howard Stark and he is their number one priority, how will that blow some of these connections apart if they do identify? But in this episode, we do see that camera being brought into the SSR. So it'd be interesting to see how that chucks a proverbial cat amongst the pigeons.
Yeah. But I love how they've done this. As I said, this is my big point for Daniel Souza. It's just that it's very easy in a show like this to just say, okay, this is a show about a woman who comes back from war. It's not. It may just be called Agent Carter, but they're filling the world out quite well with some characters that I'm interested in seeing what they're going to do as well for the next 8 episodes. It would have been very easy to put Haley Atwell crying in a corner over Captain America for half the episode and fighting bad guys for the other half of the episode. But I'm liking some of the characters that are in here. Really liking the idea of exploring, the other side of things, and the experience of a wounded war veteran is just as difficult a proposition as the experience of a female war veteran coming back. So I like that they're exploring both of them. Yeah. John, what's your final point?
Leviathan.
That is my final point too.
And it's coming.
Yes.
What is it? Who is it? Where is it?
Well,
who are
Leviathan
these sellers?
No, joke.
Who are these sellers? What's going on? And I mean, is it obviously Roxxon because it was at the Roxxon facility? Is it, obviously there's these guys with their voice box taken out, there's 2 of them, and who are they? Who are they working for? Is it Hydra? Is it AIM? Is it the Russians? Is it some other secret organization? Who is it? And then just to mix it all up, you have a fairly cryptic conversation between Jarvis and Howard Stark right at the end, where Jarvis says that Carter is an excellent choice who likely does not have any suspicions. What are they hiding, and can they ultimately be trusted? It is one of those things where, on the face of it, I would be giving Howard Stark my trust on the basis of his movie roles in Captain America Winter Soldier. And the same with Jarvis by association. But here we have that slightly dubious conversation about what their true motives are. Are they for good? Are they for evil? Is there any truth to him being hunted down for selling weapons to enemies like the SSR are doing? So at the moment, that's still very much open, but I'm hoping that they can redeem themselves. But this conversation was just, oh, okay, so are they aware of Leviathan and maybe trying to engage with it to stop it, or are they part of it?
Yeah, really interesting, isn't it? Really interesting. I love these guys. They're so creepy. They're very like the original version of Hydra that we would have seen in the Nick Fury comic books of the 60s. Pre-Baron Strucker and pre-Steranko going all crazy with his psychedelic drawings, I suppose we'll put it that way.
Art,
yeah, so absolutely, but some of my favorite art, of course. But some of the Hydra agents at the time would have been people that infiltrated Shield. They would have been, that kind of thing. It was very like a James Bond, good guy, bad guy. Two sides of the same coin kind of thing. These guys are really interesting characters. I love the way that you're able to tell who's a member of the cult is by the 3-pointed cut in their throats. Really interesting. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do. But I also love the typewriter. I just wanted to call it out. Fantastic. That seems to be the communication device that they have. Very reminiscent of Fringe, a TV show that I really, really enjoy as well. So it's kind of a Cold War era type for these characters, but with a nice sci-fi twist and a nice little element of sci-fi.
definitely.
Yeah, I really enjoy that. So it's not a very it's not just an exploration of a woman coming home from war. There is also the Marvel element in there, and you can really feel it.
And the espionage.
Scenes.
I mean, it's very Bondy. I mean, when the bad guy was sat at the typewriter and he's using the old style razor as an aerial and linking that into the typewriter, and I can't remember, it's probably on a box of cigarettes or something like that. But that to me felt like Man with the Golden Gun, where putting the gun together with a lighter and all this different kind of thing, a pen. So this was really, really good, just how they did that in that situation. Again, it chucks the whole espionage, the spy game thing out there, which is great as well.
Yeah. As I said, that was my last point as well, Leviathan. I couldn't not talk about it. Obviously, this is the first episode of the series, so a lot of our conversation will be quite similar. It's very concentrated on bringing Peggy to the forefront and the other characters to the forefront. So I know there's going to be crossover in this episode. Do you have any notes about the episode at all, John?
Yes, I do. I do have a few case files here from the SSR that I really liked. Jarvis comforting Peggy after Colleen had been killed, and she felt really responsible. And just the hand over the back of the booth, I thought was really nice. And then I also then liked Peggy, standing up for the girls and sticking it to the misogynist in the same diner who, is really just being an absolute fool to the waitress who Peggy seems to be befriending. She just, fork in the side and is like, if I push any harder, this will burst one of your important arteries, and you'll be dead and bleed out in 5 seconds. So tip well, and just the fact that he's chucking out his money and she gets the tip that she deserves for having to put up with that guy, really good. And just nice little touches. So they're my 2 notes for this episode, definitely.
Really good fun, definitely. For me, it's the gadgets of Peggy Carter. She's definitely seeming very James Bond. I love, although James probably wouldn't use lipstick to kill someone. I don't think he's ever done that before. But I love that she's got that little twist of being a beautiful woman out for a night on the town and kisses a guy on the lips and knocks him out. It's a great little femme fatale moment, and definitely being able to use those kind of gadgets. I'm really looking forward to seeing what she's going to use in future. And also the fact that she was able to defuse the bomb essentially by using household items in her bathroom. fantastic. You can tell she obviously was in the army. You tell she's using her army training for something when she gets home. That's absolutely brilliant. Really love the moment when she's sitting in the bathroom with the smoke traveling all around her, pours herself a cup of scotch and knocks it back after saving the world. And they'll never know she did it.
Absolutely. And I love the watch face that she puts onto the safe when she goes to open it and break the safe. I love that, just seeing the hands going one way then the other. Sort of really just old school mechanical way of doing it. Really, really good.
Right, Man from U.N.C.L.E. kind of style, or Spy.
Absolutely. And I think my final note would be the fight scene. I really, you know me, I like doing things by threes, and of course, there is the fight scene between her and, we'll call him one of the Leviathan dudes with the voice box removed in her apartment. You know, she has a really good punch up and scrap, and more than holds her own, but only just. And of course, he does escape and manage to live another day and do a bit of typewriting as well.
That's
really
the scene
good.
we saw at New York Comic Con last year.
It was, indeed.
It was.
But it was a great little fight sequence, which I really enjoyed. Given some of the fight sequences that we've had on Daredevil with Charlie Cox and the sequences there, this was a really nice little sequence where she's using the fridge door to save herself. You know, she's got her face going up towards the gas flame. All that really, really good. So really good. Nice little touch.
Really good close quarters combat. Yeah,
exactly.
Always like a bit of that, definitely. I've got one final note.
Surprise.
One final note is Dr. Vanko. Recognize the name? So Peggy goes to find out some information from a Dr. Vanko in this episode. Dr. Vanko is the father of Ivan Vanko, who is Whiplash in Iron Man 2, played by Mickey Rourke. The character does mention at the beginning of that film that his father worked very, very closely with Howard Stark, Tony Stark's dad, and that's why he has a grudge with Tony Stark, because Howard apparently stole all of his father's plans and used them as his own plans. So is this setting up something new for later on in the season?
That's a really good spot, because, that was absolutely central to Iron Man 2. Yeah, really good, and a nice continuity between the Marvel Universe on film and TV.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, really,
definitely. Well, listeners, if you've spotted anything that I missed out or we missed out on our coverage, make sure you send in your feedback to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. So that's our coverage of Agent Carter, Season 1, Episode 1. Delighted to have done this one. John, do you defend this episode of Agent Carter?
I do defend this episode of Agent Carter. I would give it 4 red Stetsons out of 5.
Wow.
I think the connection with the cinematic universe that they do in this episode is really good. I love the themes of female empowerment being brought in as well. Leviathan is teased. What is it? Who is it? What's going to happen in the future? And just seeing this lightness of touch, you know, there is a fun element to this show as well. And that is really nice. And I think there seems to be really good chemistry between Peggy and Jarvis, played by Hayley Atwell, and James Darcy. Really good kind of connection seems to be there. And in fact, you saw that at San Diego Comic-Con just last weekend. You know, they seem to have a really good friendship and connection off screen as well. So it really was a great first episode for pulling you into this world. And I'm looking forward to seeing now where this goes. So for me, this was a really solid, good episode, and with lots of little references. And I would give it a good, strong 4 red Stetsons out of 5. Derek, do you defend this episode of Agent Carter?
I can't say how much I defend this episode. This is fantastic TV. I had spent an entire hour with a big smile on my face, apart from the moments I cried, which there were 2. I think this was a tough episode and a really good one. This really got me exactly where I wanted to be where I wanted to be. It got me in the fields, I think, is the Whedonverse phrase for it. I really went along with this. This is exactly the show I wanted to see for Peggy Carter. I'm really hoping they can pay this off over the next 7 episodes of the show. It's at the highest of recommends for me. If you haven't watched it and you've listened to our podcast, you've got 7 episodes that we won't have spoiled for you. Go watch it. It is fantastic. You'll fall in love with Haley Atwell in this character again.
Yeah, well, I think with that, it's to say, please check us out on defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, where the Agent Carter podcasts will be going up. You can also search Defenders TV Podcast on any good podcast catcher, such as Stitcher, Player FM, and of course, any comments to feedback at defenderstvpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you, find out your thoughts about Agent Carter and anything on the wider Marvel cinematic or TV universe as well. And so it's just for me to say thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, we'll be back again next week with, obviously, Agent Carter episode 2. If you're just joining us for this episode, remember, all of our other episodes about the Daredevil Netflix TV show are available on this feed. Just go and check us out on iTunes, as John said. We will be doing one more episode in between episode 1 of Agent Carter and episode 2 of Agent Carter, which will have the full team of the Defenders. Hopefully, crossing fingers, we can get the schedules aligned and get all 4 of us together in a room again. And we will be covering Ant-Man.
Marvel's Ant-Man.
Marvel's Ant-Man released this week in the UK and Ireland. So.
Small but mighty.
Yes.
Small but mighty.
Looking forward to that one.
Yeah. Definitely.
Should be good fun. So thanks again for joining us. We will talk to you very soon.
Bye.